I thank you very much for tuning in to That Will Never Work podcast. I want you to think about financial planning as only for people with six figures in the bank. Do you really consider that? Well, think again today with our special guest, Eric. He joins me to break down why true financial freedom is built, not gifted, and how you can start right now. We'll talk about it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
So, we're going to secure the bag today. And so the idea is, what if the biggest threat to your financial future isn't just how much you make, but how little you plan? So, Eric, can you please answer that question for us today?
My goodness, I'm delighted to, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I think the planning is the most important piece.
Mm-hmm.
People confuse income and wealth.
Mm.
You see studies about, oh, this state is the wealthiest state in America. Well, no, it's not. It's the highest income, but they also have some of the highest taxes and expenses and cost of living. So how much you make is far less important than how much you keep and how much you deploy for the positive. And unfortunately, financial literacy and financial taught in school, and they're not taught in a lot of households. Either.
Mm-hmm.
If mom and dad don't understand them, they're not teaching them to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching your parents fight about money or struggle with a credit card or deal with all the various things that some of us grew up with. And it's extremely difficult to know what to do or who to talk to. And you hear horror stories about is it a scam? Is this good advice? How do we do it? And there are tools out there to help you do a plan yourself. There are lots of resources to help with planning, but ultimately, having a plan is like having a map to get somewhere. And if you don't know where you're going or where you are, it's real hard to plot that course.
Right. And I think part of that is that in all reality, what is the starting point? Sometimes we don't understand what's the true starting point because, like you stated, we're not always taught that in school. We're not taught that at home. And sometimes our breakfast table people don't know it as well. So how do we know where we really need to start from, especially if we're not surrounded in that type of community?
I mean, I can give you two answers. The first answer is your starting point is today. It's right now. Because waiting another week, month, or year will not benefit you. So there's that. The more macro answer here is start with your first paycheck. The day you get your first paycheck, as paltry as it might be, whether you're 18 at the time or 14 at the time or 22 at the time, when you get your first paycheck and it's the first time you see all those deductions taken out of what you made, and all the different expenses that you have, and you're getting a taste of, well, wait a minute, I thought I was making X, but I'm really bringing home 0.6 or 0.7X. Starting with your first paycheck and understanding how that works and what to do, and trying not to live on more than you make or even everything you make, those habits begin the day you get your first check, as far as I'm concerned.
So even if I get the first check, and I'm going to use the 18-year-old mind because that's when I started working in corporate America. I see this first check and I just want to go out and buy me some sneakers. I might not have had the opportunity to have certain things growing up. And so now all of a sudden I get this check and I'm like, well, you know what? New pair of sneakers. It's summertime. I'm gonna give me some sneakers, give me a nice pair of shorts, and that's gonna be my outfit for the summer. So how do I combat my lack with that something that's in the future? I can't think that far in advance.
Well, and your experience is extremely common, especially if your first check happens to be the first time you had money in your pocket. I mean, if you grew up without, then you're thinking differently. I think it's really paramount for us to take every check and put it away for something, whether it's something exciting like a vacation or whether it's something terrible like suddenly you need 4 tires or a washer and dryer. Life happens.
Right.
But if you, whatever you bring home, if you can take 15 cents of the dollar and pretend it doesn't exist and just put it someplace where you don't have an ATM card, You're not swiping it any place. You can't spend it with your Apple Watch or any of the things. It will begin a process of living on a percentage. And I use 15% as a rule of thumb. Rules of thumb don't work, because here's the reality. When you got your first check, were you at zero? Were you broke? Did you have money in the bank, or did you have student loans or credit card debt or other things where you were starting in a hole? Because if you're starting in a hole, stop digging first. and then start filling in the hole, because you got to get back in. If you're in a race, if you considered the marathon of building wealth, and it is a marathon, not a sprint for the vast majority of us, so we should think about it that way. If you're in that race and you're starting in debt, you are literally starting behind the starting line. You're not at zero. You're at negative something. And so if you have that debt issue, it's an albatross. A lot of people deal with it. Consumer debt, medical debt, student loans. If you're in that position, it takes an enormous amount of discipline to get out, and it takes an accountability partner or a plan or something automated, so that you can avoid the real scary stuff and avoid things like bankruptcies or creditor issues or the stuff that will give you a terrible relationship with money from day one that doesn't sometimes get better. So, but it's okay to treat yourself to that pair of sneakers, just not every week. It's one thing to get it, but well, I mean, first of all, you only have 2 feet, as far as I can tell.
Right.
Secondly, if you're barefoot, get the sneakers. If you have sneakers, save for something, but start building those habits. I mean, there's everybody's in a different place when they get started on that financial spectrum. But good habits have to be created yourself. They're no different than a habit at the gym or at the dinner plate. I mean, we all make habits and we all live with them. And financial wellness starts with good habits and good behavior.
So, and I know, again, I'm speaking from my own experience, right? You talk about out of every dollar, try to take out 15 cents, right? But what if I start seeing that 15 cents and it's growing, right? And I really want that ring pop, and it cost me 55 cents, right? 75 cents. And now I see that I really want this thing. Should I really try to take away from that? Because a lot of times we see that money and we get a little antsy. That money in our pocket is a little antsy. So what should we do in that situation?
You should be putting it where it's not in your pocket, and it can't make you antsy because you don't see it. Literally put it out of your reach. Put it in a different account. Don't have it in your checking account. Don't have it in a shoebox under your bed or anything. And for God's sakes, don't put it in your wallet, because that is spending money. That's walking around money. You want to put it where you're not going to get to it. And it's kind of like, you see the axe on a wall, and it says in case of emergency, break glass.
Right.
That's what that money is supposed to be. Now, if it's a vacation fund and you're seeing that ring pop, if you were to go get that every time you got to the 55 cents in that example, you would never get the vacation. You would never get the Big Mac, because you would keep settling for the ring pops.
Right.
So the idea here is, if you can delay your gratification for something that means something, and that means visioning it. People talk about the psychology of it. Picture yourself on that beach or on that boat or in that mountain cabin or whatever is your thing. Picture it. And if that money is being set aside for that purpose, don't let that dream go away just because you see something shiny. It's like, oh, squirrel.
Right.
You don't, I mean, and the 15 cents that I suggested is not the vacation fund. That's the financial independence fund. Vacation fund's on top of that. So you start with here's the emergency stuff. The fun stuff, that's, when my daughter was young, I started her on some allowance. She was about 8 years old. And I taught her the value of the 3 jars. And I wanted this to be a life lesson for her. And it wasn't a lot of money. I was giving her $5 a week, for age appropriate stuff around the house. And I had her go out to a craft store and get 3 jars and label them. And she labeled them fun and savings and charity. And every week, instead of a $5 bill, I gave her 5 $1 bills. And every week she had to put at least 1 in charity. She had to put at least 1 in long-term savings. The other 3 she could put anywhere she wanted. And Maurice, what's interesting is the first couple of weeks, months, those 3 always went into fun. They always went to the fun jar. But as the fun jar started to fill up and she maybe didn't use it all, I watched her start putting more into the other bucket. And I didn't coach that. I just watched that happen. And so at the end of that first year, I took her to the bank. I introduced her to a bank branch manager. We took the few dollars that were in that jar and opened an account for her, and I matched it so she could learn the value of that so that it became something. And then we also went online and found charities that were reasonable for someone her age. There was one around kids and one around animals. Great. We made donations in our joint name and sent it off so that we would get those letters saying, thank you for your contribution. And she felt good about what she was doing. They were her choices, not mine.
Right.
And I just wanted it to start a lifetime of being a philanthropist and being generous, but also being responsible. And I would say that it was a great exercise. I would say I didn't get an A for this exercise. This was B- work at the end because unfortunately, as I have only one child, I think she might be spoiled a little every now and again. So she would look at a bank statement. I tried to show her, look how much is growing in the bank. And she saw interest was a penny.
Yes.
And she said to me, Dad, why would I leave this there to get a penny of interest? If I could spend it and have some fun with it, it's only a penny. And all I kept thinking was, well, she's not wrong, but I can't say that.
Right.
I can't teach her that, but she's right. So, at some point, I'll teach her investments. She's still too young, but I'll teach her how to get more than a penny, ideally for her money. But I want her to get in good habits. And the habits we form as young people, a lot of them stick with us. For people who get married later in life, they say guys aren't housebroken. If they're 35 or 40 when they get married, good luck, ladies, because we are not changing at that moment. Really, you have to build habits early.
So there is something that I'm listening to you and it keeps playing in my head because you talked about instant gratification, and a lot of times we're trying to move away whatever our pain was. And that's what's stuck in our head, getting away from pain. So if I need to have that ring pop to give me what I perceived as energy or happiness or whatever I associated with happiness as a child, right? And so how can I change my mindset and start really putting this plan in place? Because, the three jar idea is nice for some people, right? But again, if I'm moving away from pain, well, you know what? I'm going to start taking away from charity because I am charity. Like, we'll start making excuses, right?
Well, yeah, no, that's fair. I hear you. And learning that behavior is extremely tough. And you're right, it's not for everybody. Some people are not blessed in that situation, and that just is what it is. The instant gratification to me, the moving away from pain, I think we have to really think about is what we're doing. Going to be a long-term solution for the pain, or is it going to be a dopamine hit? Is it a quick pop? That little blast of caffeine that wakes you up, but half hour later you're sleepy again?
Right.
Is that really the solution, or are you better off taking a walk for 10 minutes than having that cup of coffee? One of them will wind up being better for your health. It didn't cost anything, and it had long-term benefits. The other one cost you something. It was a quick hit, and the benefits were gone almost as fast as they got there. Now, it's hard to explain that to children.
Yeah, it is.
But with adults, as well as I do, you're better off with 15 minutes on the treadmill than 15 minutes behind the all you can eat.
Right.
And yet we still do that. We still do it to ourselves sometimes. So it's a hard lesson to learn, but learning it young is extremely helpful, because it's a hard habit to break when you're not doing that. People who spend more than they make will struggle with debt their entire lives. And some people with debt, it's really not their fault. Somebody got sick or life happens or there's just in a circumstance, it's real hard. And that's true. But there are people in debt who make entirely too much money to have that problem. And they're trying to keep up with the Joneses. They're trying to have as fancy car as their neighbors. They're trying to have that new pair of sneakers every Friday, whatever it is.
Right.
It's that is a recipe for poverty, not for wealth.
So how do we deal with it if we see that all the time? Again, commercialism, right?
Big time.
We see that all the time. And if that's constantly in our face 100% of the time. The idea that sex sells, you know, so everybody wants this real tight fitting clothes and everything, you know, whatever it is, all the makeup and hair and, you know, like you said, the fancy cars. I want a Range Rover. You get what I mean?
I do. I still don't have one. I do get it. I get it. It's what you have to do is you have to envision what's coming down the pike, because those folks who are doing that at 30, for example, you look at two 30-year-olds, and one of them is putting away and saving money and investing money, and the other one's having it and having fun with it and doing different things. And you could argue that the best recipe is to do a little of both, because I know some people who squirrel away every penny and never spend it, and they're miserable. And sometimes they die and they never got to do anything.
Right.
You know, so I'm not suggesting that you delay any form of fun or gratification. I am suggesting that those two 30-year-olds will become 40 or 50 or 60-year-olds, God willing. And at 60, one of them is still going to be dealing with a credit card bill and still working 40 hours a week and still trying to make stuff meet. And the other one is taking whatever vacations they want, and they're not punching that clock anymore, and they have bandwidth to do a lot of things that is eternal. And so there's two stories there. There's the now and there's the later.
Right.
And unfortunately, the now sells. You know, you said sex sells. It's right in front of you.
Right.
It's flashy and it's fun. But ultimately, I will settle for. I wanted to reach and still want to encourage people to reach financial independence, so that it no longer matters how they spend their money. It matters how much they spend, but it doesn't matter how they spend it anymore. And that's a big deal. That's a form of freedom that most people never ever reach.
And you know, and I want
a big deal.
I'm gonna tell you, like as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, because I really like your analogy, or you know what you did with your child with the 3 jars, right? Because there's one jar that we take it for granted. Again, I turn it on myself. That one jar of charity, right? I'm gonna take that jar. Hey, I'm charity. But here's the reality, because it's like what you do for others lasts longer, right? Also karma. Right. So if I'm going to give away, right, it's going to come back to me one way or another. And I think those type of things we don't consider. Yes, it looks like I put $3 away for fun. Eventually, when I get older, 2 of those 3 is going to go to bills.
At least. The problem is when 4 of the 3 go to bills, then you've got a problem.
I know, right?
That math doesn't math.
I know, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I think that's something that's very key that I would like people to understand. That 3 jar, that third jar being charity is just as important as the first jar, right? You know,
I think so. Yeah.
You know, because you never know when that cycle or that circle is going to come back to. You know, the circle of life might be singing to you. You know,
it might, and there's lots of ways to donate to charity. It doesn't have to be money. Not everybody has the bandwidth for it. If you literally are paycheck to paycheck and just barely getting by, you're not going to do this necessarily, and that's okay. But volunteer your time. Work at a food bank. Do something for somebody who needs it, because it creates incredible perspective to see people who you take so much of this for granted at a given point in your life. And there are people for whom that's the thin line between making it and not making it. And so if you can surround yourself with people, like-minded people who care about other people, it doesn't have to be money. If you don't have money, have time. And if you don't have time, have talent. You know, there's other ways to do charity where you can give of yourself in a lot of different ways. I mean, give a pint of blood. I mean, don't give more than one. You might need it, but you know, if you're doing that every day, you're going to have a new problem.
Right.
But whatever it is, you can change somebody's life for what might feel like a really small thing for you, and it will give you a new perspective. And I don't know whether it's karma. I don't know if I believe in karma, but I do think, because look, bad things happen to good people.
Yes, it does.
They just do. And good things happen for bad people, and you got to wonder how that happens.
Right.
But it does, and it does happen. But I got to live with myself. I got to look at myself in the mirror and say, did I make somebody's life better today? Did I do the things that I could do to make the world a better place. Is my legacy going to be, I had a really nice Range Rover?
Mm-hmm.
Or is my legacy going to be, I helped promote financial literacy at an elementary school in such and such neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whatever it is, whatever you're into, whether it's healthcare, whether it's animals, whether it's older people, whether it's children, whether it's the environment, makes no difference what it is if it's
Mm-hmm.
something you're passionate about. But make a difference, make the world a better place. If we all did that, Maurice, I know this sounds like la la land out there, but if everybody did something little every day or once a week, even,
Mm-hmm.
the world would be a better place.
It would.
It really would, and it doesn't have to cost money. It just doesn't.
And I think those type of things or those type of situations will cost you more, right? Because you will receive more. That's where your wealth comes in. Your knowledge, your talent, like you said, your talents, your gifts, whatever it is, like that's more valuable than sometimes that money that's in your pocket. For some of us, I know that's how I feel about myself. Because the information that I give does help other individuals to have a better life. Even the information you're giving today, the 3-jar, mindset, I think is wealth beyond what you probably even imagine. For some people that, especially those that listen to this show, I think some people should be able to take that information and run with that. They're saying, hey, long term, I'll have maybe $30 at the end of the year, but it's still $30 than I had at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, no, it's incremental, and if you do it right, it builds on itself. When you look at a formula, and I'm not going to go all algebraic on anybody today, I promise, but when you look at a formula and you look at wealth creation, you look at the accumulation of a number, there's a couple of different variables in there, and the one that makes the biggest difference in the formula is the exponent. The exponent is time. Time is the biggest driver of success. Starting at 20 instead of 30 or 40 or 50, time being on your side is the greatest influencer of wealth creation that exists. And it doesn't mean if you're listening to this and you're 38 and you're like, man, I haven't started, it's too late. It's not too late. You're better off at 38 than 43 or 48. But for the people who are able to start either right out of school or right at their first job or early on, my goodness, you wind up building numbers that you can barely comprehend just by making those deposits over time and doing it every month or every week or every paycheck, whatever it is.
Right.
It adds up so much that you look back on it and you almost laugh where you started. You keep the statements. I'm serious. Keep the statements. You start doing this year and you keep the statement from 2025 and you put it in your own little time capsule and you do whatever you're doing. You take 15 cents and you put it away someplace, ideally someplace where it'll grow. And we could talk about that, but whatever you do, put a time capsule on it. Look at it 10 years from today. You'll be blown away that something that you barely even felt could be a game changer for you down the road. And especially if you're putting away a set percentage of what you make, every time you get a raise, you're putting away a little more because it's a percentage. It's not a dollar figure.
Right.
And so as you ideally keep up with inflation and get a raise, or you have a side hustle or do any of the other things to make additional money, that's where this starts to grow. So the biggest factor is time. And I would say the biggest determinant of success is stick-to-itiveness. Don't quit. Don't worry about what the news is saying. Don't worry about what the market's doing. Don't worry about all the noise du jour. It's always something. Seriously, it is always something.
You're right.
I have a love-hate relationship with media. I do, because media, it really exists to sell advertising, to have more media.
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm not, this is not a conspiracy theory. That's their business model, is they've got to capture eyeballs in order to make money. And sometimes the way they do that is telling people what they want to hear. And anytime you get advice from a media source, you have to consider, is this one size fits all advice, or are they talking to me? And the answer is virtually every time it's one size fits all. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about like a garment that's one size fits all, the one that keeps coming up is a hospital gown. And nobody looks good in one.
No, not at all.
So I just think one size fits all. It's good to educate yourself.
Right.
But don't take advice that you hear, whether it's Jim Cramer or Susie Orman or it's you and me, don't take this advice like it was customized for you. These are strategies. These are ideas. These are things that you can learn from and run with, but you're better off actually learning and understanding what's in it for you, what you need to do, because you're 27 years old or you're 77 years old. We're having a different conversation.
And I'm going to tell you before we sign off, you said something about media and something. You know, I heard not too long ago that they're going to start making pennies. So my question,
it costs more than a penny to make one. I'm saying it costs like 7 cents to make a penny. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Round to the nearest 5.
Right.
Whatever.
So my thing is like, should I keep my copper then? I got a whole bunch of pennies still, you know. Will it be?
I don't know. Copper at least is useful.
Right.
You know, copper's used. Gold's not useful at all. You can't make anything out of it. It's all soft and miserable. Copper, you can make wire out of. You can do other things.
Right.
I don't know how much copper is actually in a penny anymore, my friend.
Yeah, I know that's right.
I think that ship sailed. I think what you've got here is tin that's painted to look
right.
like copper, and it's worthless. And because of inflation, it's worth less today than it was a year ago or a year prior. You know, I remember a penny gumball machine.
Yes.
You can spend $5 on a pack of gum now if you're not careful.
Yeah. So you're right.
I'm glad they're going to stop making pennies. Pretty soon they're going to stop with coins.
Yeah.
There will come a day, because it first of all, with everything digitized and everything on credit cards and everything on, you know, on the sweeps, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
And secondly, it's so expensive and cumbersome for banks, for you know, for Brinks to do the security and carry all the heavy stuff. Like it really is kind of silly, but penny's a good start. And no, I wouldn't keep your pennies. In fact, I'd spend them before you take them to some store and they don't know what they are.
I know, right?
Have you ever taken a $2 bill to like a Taco Bell?
I have not.
If you ever take a $2 bill to a Taco Bell, and I'm not picking on Taco Bell, but I am picking on $2 bills. If you ever do that, you will find some cashiers who think it's fake.
Oh yeah, I've
never
seen
seen one before.
Right.
They think it's fake.
Right.
And it's real American currency. This is worth $2.
Yeah.
It was the silliest idea of all time to do. Who needed a $2 bill, and for what? We needed what? We had to honor another dead president.
Right.
Anyway, people will not know what a penny was any more than my kid could figure out what an 8-track tape or a cassette was.
Yeah.
Just saying.
You're right. Even though some of them are coming back.
Well, LPs are back.
Right.
LPs are back. Something about that cracking and popping sounds so much better than the digital stuff now. But no, I defy you to take a couple of high schoolers and have them try and make a phone call on a rotary phone.
Oh yeah, you can't do that either.
Stare at it, they won't know what to do.
No, not at all.
Roll down a window in your car. Are you kidding?
Nope. What is that? What? How do you even operate that?
Are you Gen X? Are you a Gen Xer?
Yeah, I was born 1976. So yes, okay, I know that.
I'm a 71 baby, and the reason I asked is because Gen X, we get no attention and no love from anybody.
Correct.
It's all about the boomers, and then it's all about the millennials and the Gen Z. And I used to think it was because we were the smallest generation, and therefore we'd never have political pull. We're going to do whatever the boomers say, and then we're going to do whatever the millennials want because we have no political pull. But I saw something this week that I thought was really funny. And it said the reason Gen X doesn't get any advice or love is because we took care of ourselves when we were 12, and we don't need your help.
Yes, so, and I agree with that.
Yeah, we were 30 when we were 12.
Right. We were.
And by the way, we're still 30.
Pretty much. I mean, we're the best looking crew. You know, we don't look our age.
We're a good looking crew unless you look at the high school photos.
I know that's right.
That's not real pretty. Don't do that. Don't share that on your show. You won't.
I know, right? Yeah. You know, but Eric, man, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I really do.
This was fun. I hope in securing the bag, people can start with a couple of habits, whether it's the 3 jars, whether it's the 15 cents on the dollar, whether it's getting some financial advice that isn't from a talking head on TV or whatever. I just hope that folks will check that out. We actually have a financial literacy course on our website. If you go to bfguniversity.com, it's free for anybody who wants to take it. And it's just some basics about credit and about banking and about employee benefits, and simple and free. If people want to check that out, we'd be delighted to have them do that.
All right, that's cool. And of course, that information will be on the show notes. So do you want them to follow you on any social media or anything where they might be able, maybe your YouTube channel or anything else where they might be get some more information?
I'm not hard to find on social media. I'm all over. If you go to BFG Financial Advisors, you'll find us everywhere. But I will share a quick story with you, Maurice, and that is that I've written 3 books. The most recent one, shameless plug, is called Don't Retire, Graduate, because I actually think retirement's bad for us. But when I first did a book, I had to create an author page on Amazon.com so people could buy, at Amazon. There's another Eric D. Brotman who writes books. This is a true story. So I have an author page. Do not confuse me with the PhD who writes books on how to toilet train cats. That's a real thing. This is a true story. That is out there. And I've received so many of them from like fraternity brothers who think it's hysterical. Really? Oh, it's terrible. We're his biggest client. And by the way, it's a picture book. Just tread very, very carefully. It's terrible.
All right, so what we'll do is we'll try to make sure that your direct link is in the show notes.
Please, you don't want that.
but before I let you go, I got one more question though, Eric.
Okay.
All right, and this is the one that I ask literally everyone that's on the show. It's my would you rather question.
Okay.
Would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road? Now, before you answer though, use your imagination. There's no right or wrong answer. Just want to hear how you process information.
When you say choose 3 doors, you mean choose one of the 3 or take all 3?
It is however you decide to interpret that.
Oh, well, at the end of the day, if I got to choose all 3 doors and then decide what was behind them, I would open the doors first. I'd love to have some sure, some sense. The problem with a fork in the road is, it's so easy to take the road most people take. And we started the show that way. And, this whole idea of taking the road less traveled is a really hard thing to do, particularly in the moment. I think that's a much harder decision because it feels very binary, you're going to do A or B, and your life is, those choose your own adventure books back in the day, choose one, choose the other, and one of them you end up like in a pit somewhere, and the other one you're doing great.
Right.
I think the having the ability to look at a couple of options and pick one with knowledge and with understanding is better than having to choose A or B, knowing that you can't go back. And I think when you take a path in the road, you're living with that choice. You don't really get a redo.
Well, as Gen Xers, a lot of times we do make a decision, right? Some of these people that don't know how to make a decision and keep going with it though.
Yeah, well, and by the time you've made it, you got to live with it.
Right.
Whether that decision's an ethical decision or a financial decision or a job decision or a life partner decision, you're living with it, at least for a while. So, every decision you make, you're essentially choosing against every other possible decision. And, we could go crazy trying to say, well, we need the absolute perfect optimal decision. There is no such thing. There's making a reasonable decision with the information you have and trying to do the best you can, and then living with whatever choice you made, and then realizing there's going to be another fork in the road yet, and then another, and then another.
Yep.
And maybe you can pull yourself back toward the way you want to be if you make a misstep.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we get confused in that because like you're stating, we could go in a whole circle and never feel like we're going forward or progressing, because sometimes we confuse movement with progress, right?
Yes, we do. Have you ever run on a treadmill and wondered why you haven't gotten anywhere? That's what it is. Our life can be a treadmill. It's a hamster wheel. Right.
But Eric, man, I appreciate you being on the show today, man. I had some fun.
Me too. I enjoyed this a lot, and for everybody who's listening, I appreciate what you're doing. Keep doing it, and keep having fun like this. It's very, very entertaining. I enjoyed being a guest.
Cool. Thank you very much. And of course, y'all, Eric's information will be in the show notes, and we will ensure that the correct person is listed.
Please.
And we thank y'all very much, and I will talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?